Yeah, I was reminding people that I still remember some 15 years ago, the famous, I would say infamous, paper by The Economist that said in its title, Africa, the hopeless continent. And 12 years later, 10 to 12 years later, The Economist came again with the magnificent, I would say, even more realistic title, Africa Rising. For me, this continent has never been hopeless. The light has been there, maybe dimmed at the moment because of poor governance, but the light has been there. And if you take a static picture of a situation, you may not get the full potential of that situation. But if you look at the dynamic movement, a film, a footage of the situation, you can see the move and the rise. And I would see Africa with not a static eye, but a dynamic eye. And you could see that the dynamism of this continent is still alive in people's heart. It is in the energy that our women are investing all the time, but yet we all African leaders have not given space to the woman. And our statistics are showing in Africa that we in UNDP did a study that showed that the gender gap is costing us $73 billion. If we were to close that gap, we would gain 4 to 5% of GDP, for instance. We have to give that space to the woman. We have to give that space to our youth. It is because of lack of opportunities and gaps in education that they are migrating. Not that they want to go. Nobody wants to leave his or her own land. But once you give them education and once you give them opportunities, they will stay and they'll flourish the opportunities. So the hope is there, the light is there. It behooves our leaders to nurture that, and that's my main recommendations. Now, coming back to the MDGs and why did we scale up to the ODDs, MDGs were extremely powerful in garnering support on the social field. The MDGs were basically social objectives, but as we say, you can't even enhance social objective if you don't deal with the economics. And that's the problem we have in Africa. We have economies that they are still unipolar, not extremely diversified, and that need structural economic transformations. We spoke about growth that is inclusive and resilience. You can only have it if you have economies that are really well transformed and postured in a way that they can capture maximum of values. And I was giving the examples that on average, I know there is the tyranny of average, but just to give you an illustration, on average, when you look at the value change in Africa, like any kind of product, on average, you have only 15% of value that is retained internally and 85% which is going out. You can't sustain development like that. You have to transform your economy to ensure that the maximum value is retained. And I was saying that that's not the whole story, only diversification, because we have economies with extremely narrow bases, and it is quite an imperative to go through integration. And integration is a line to adopt. And I must confess that it is not yet deep in the policies that I have seen. It is embedded in the vision of our leaders and at the African Union. Agenda 2063 of the AU aim at integration, but this has to trickle down at the national level. Is where I would call on our political leaders to put regional integration into their own national policies. So there is work to be done there. Many things. First, development starts with owning or controlling the assets. In most of our culture, women are not getting the assets, like the land, for instance. It is, and sometimes it's cultural. If you don't empower women by giving them the assets first, access to banking or ownership of land, education, at the highest level, you will not give the space for women to develop. So this is extremely important. The second important thing is, it's not easy, is to fight against some traditions or cultural traditions that inhibit women's development, and that's political leadership is extremely important. Political leadership is important, and we have seen that in countries where women's political leadership have been reaffirmed, all those constraints tend to mellow or to go away. So pushing women to have a stronger command or control, occupation of political space is, in my way, the way to go. So empowering women by giving them control and ownership of assets, and pushing women at the political heights in terms of commanding heights is the way to go. Absolutely, we are just champions, catalytic champions. We are not comprehensive champions. We are catalytic champions, and we call on others to join this movement. Is what we do, but we're just catalytic. Even in this, as we are champions, we are not the leaders, really. The leaders are the governments. That's why whenever we do organize this conference, we want to anchor it under a leadership. This time we wanted to have the leadership of DRC. But DRC invited other African leaders to join in this meeting. So it's African show, because it's African time. We're just catalytic and supporting this movement. That's all we do.